Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode, I actually don't know. I think it's episode 12, but it might be episode 11. I don't know. Of Might Help, Can't Hurt Conversations with Leaders, Doers, and Friends. And I am here with a leader, doer, and friend, Dr. Dicken Bettinger. Dicken, welcome.
Hey, Michael.
And there's a bunch of things I wanted to catch up on with you today. Not least of which is what meditation, which is something that you and I talk about a lot, are about to be a day on, has to do. What is its relevance in times of change? But before we get to that, I guess the two things that I want to go with is first off, just to let people know, if you don't know Dicken, where's the best place for them to find out more about you, Dicken? Is it Three Principles Mentoring?
Yes, threeprinciplesmentoring.com.
And that's with the number 3.
Yes.
And you'll find out that he's really cool, but you don't need to do that, because within 5 minutes you're going to know that he's really cool. But here's the question I've got to start with. What the hell was it like having COVID? Like, I saw you for breakfast.
Yeah.
About in March, and I remember us kind of across the table from each other going, "Boy, wouldn't this suck?" And then, like a week later, I think I heard that Koisi had gotten sick, and then
Koisi is my wife. She got sick first. She was part of a.
She has to win at everything, doesn't she?
She beat me on this one. He was part of the infamous choral group from Washington where 60 people got together before there were any restrictions.
Yeah.
And 53 of them ended up with the virus.
Yeah.
And from one rehearsal. And so Koisi had it, and then I got it. And sucked is a mild word. I mean,
words isn't really my thing, Dicken, but I was just looking for something there.
It's really. Let me preface: I'm one of the fortunate ones.
Yeah.
It didn't go into my lungs. It didn't go into my wife's lungs. But I've never. It was 2.5 weeks where I've never felt as sick, and. For example,
good.
I had.
Look away now, kids.
Look away now. Look away now. I'd have to pee, and I'd go, "Oh no!" I have to get up and walk 10 steps, and I'd do it and come back, and I'd have to take a nap. I mean, I slept probably 10 hours a night and 4 to 6 hours during the day. And I was in constant pain, constant fever, headache, body aches, and fatigue like I've never felt. Like Koisi said, I didn't really talk for 2.5 weeks. And if those who know me find that extremely hard to believe.
We finally found a way.
And then I woke up on the morning of the 18th day, and every symptom had left suddenly, completely. And I felt all this energy. And shortly thereafter, I got dressed for the first time in 3 weeks and walked down about a quarter of a mile down to our beach and back. And I still had energy. I could have done it again. But I was filled with tears of gratitude. And for the interesting thing was, Michael, is for the 4 days afterwards, I had no thinking on my mind. You know how if you listen, you're always thinking about something. That voice was gone. And so I got to experience a meditative state. Since we're going to be talking about meditation, I got to experience a natural meditative state that was so deeply relaxed, so present, so awake, so alert. Every one of my senses was singing. I mean, the birds, it was like the most beautiful music I've ever heard. The wind on my cheek felt like sublime. The sound of my feet on the road, the light on the ocean brought tears to my eyes. It was like an unfiltered view. Now, I'm not really religious, but it was like I was born again. You know, the Tibetan Buddhists call it meditative state newborn consciousness. Well, oh my God, completely unfiltered, just seeing life with nothing on my mind. And on day 5, all of a sudden I heard this voice, and it was like shocking. It was like, oh my God, he's back.
Was there a second one going, no?
Yes. It was like, talk to my hand. It's like, I am not, my relationship to that voice has changed.
Yeah.
Even today, that voice comes and goes all the time, but I'm far less interested in that, knowing the absolute beauty of resting in what my teacher Sid Banks called pure consciousness, which is awareness free of the contamination of our conceptual mind, filtering our view, our way of looking at things. So I got a real taste, Michael.
So was that when you were hired as PR for COVID? Because that's literally the first time I've been tempted. It sounds like a shitty trade, but
Yeah, I've been asked to be the poster child for COVID, so it's like, you too can almost die and then be grateful afterwards.
I've seen weirder rituals to get into higher states of consciousness.
So that was my experience. I was just basically gone for 2.5 weeks. I couldn't think. I couldn't read, Michael. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, there was no way I could read. Nothing really was appealing to do other than try and just rest. And
now that's a different type of couldn't think, because the couldn't think afterwards, that sounds glorious.
yeah,
That couldn't think sounds horrible.
it was, there's a term, brain fog.
Yeah.
And I never knew what that was. It was like everything was just foggy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was disconcerting. It was like I've been taken over by the aliens, and they're using my body for some nefarious means that I may never find out. But
you do realize that will be a theory on the internet behind COVID within an hour.
Yeah.
Of course, this makes sense now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was abducted and spent time on the mothership.
So, having had that experience, so to give context, so you and I decided about a year ago that about once a year we get together and do a day.
Yeah.
And a year ago, when we started talking about it, was, let's talk about meditation, because it's something that's been a part of both of our journeys and has changed dramatically in the way that we experience it, the way that we talk about it. One of the things that, before we came on, I was saying to you that it is extraordinary to me that 6 days ago, the most important conversation in my house was about whether Nina or I would be able to get our hair cut first.
Yeah.
And now it is a conversation about just the horrific revelation of a level of racism and just crazy
Great.
all around. Now, to my mind, that makes a conversation about meditation doubly important. But I get the flip of it. So I used to be in a sitcom in Wales, and I played the New Age American guy. How they ever, it was a stretch, but what one of the running gags was whenever anything kind of crazy was going on in their world, my character would go, "I need to go meditate," and just disappear stage left. For you, what's the relevance? What's the value? What's the importance of meditation in a time of extreme unrest?
In some ways, I saw meditation as a retreat. It was a way of sort of, okay, we all deserve to have a break from the world. And I was meditating, as I was meditating 4 hours a day, and my mind was active and busy, and getting quiet, even though it would take a long time, was a blessing because I felt so good. But then I'd come back into the world, and pretty soon I would, in a sense, lose that. Now I see it very different. I don't see meditation as a way of retreating from the world to recharge your batteries. I see it as running into the heart of the world, running full speed right into the heart of the world, where the lifeblood is pumped into the universe. And two things happen. I become unfiltered as an opportunity to experience my true nature, or to experience the sense of the connection with life that already exists, right? So I feel an intimacy with life that I cherish and value. And the most important part in terms of like responding to social injustice is that, this may sound funny, but this recognition that is more and more being talked about, that we're intimately a part of the energy of life, and a characteristic of that energy is an intelligence that knows how to create life and operate it. And so the value for me now of meditation, running into the heart of the universe, into the heart of life, the true heart, it awakens love and compassion, but it also awakens this wisdom, which is, this is what we need right now in terms of how do we respond? I mean, my wife was in tears. My daughter was in tears watching painfully what was on the news and feeling that pain. And how do we respond? And in our quietest moments, wisdom is a responsive intelligence. So it brings some kind of response that's perfect for us in that moment, given who we are and what we can offer the world.
Well, I think that it's that perfect for us, given who and what and where we are, that, there's so many, I've spent way too much time, and largely inspired by my kids, like on Twitter, on in Instagram, reading, watching, just a lot. And everybody's sort of got, you should do this. You should do this. If you want to be an ally, go do this. And some of it, I look at and I go, oh, I should. Oh yeah, I should. And all it does is just provoke a feeling of kind of hopelessness in me, because I know that's just not. But what's interesting is the things that do occur to me to do. I am perfect for. Like what comes to me
Yeah.
is I was made for. That's what it feels like. And so while it is nice to get a menu when you want to do something and you don't know what to do, there is something about if you can go inside, if you can listen a little deeper, what will come to mind from that wisdom, from that inner knowing, is part of how you know it's coming from that place is it's not, oh shit, really? I've got to do that. It's like, oh boy, really? I get to do that?
Inspired.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and and that connection between meditation and inspired action, I think is greatly overlooked because the context in which meditation is often talked about is either as a retreat or as a form of spiritual development, or in other words, as a sort of almost oppositional force to the world of form, instead of a constructive force that infuses and literally transforms the world of form, changes the form.
I like that, transform. I like the word inspired too. I've always enjoyed looking at the roots of words, and spire is where you have like certain buildings have spires, and for a long time architects saw spires as a way of reaching up to a higher good.
Hmm.
So being inspired is having something occur to us fresh that feels perfect in the moment, that moves us toward what's good for the whole, as opposed to what's good for little old Dicken ego,
Yeah.
little personal self. And so I really I like that word. Becoming inspired means rising up to a higher level of consciousness so that we can respond with more love and compassion in a very practical way.
Yeah.
Like you said, personal, practical, perfect for us. And who knows what that might be? It's going to be different for every single person. What occurred to my wife is different than what occurred to my daughter, than what occurred to me. And we're all doing what we've been inspired to do.
Well, and I think that's the great conceptual disconnect that people have is, oh, you spiritual people, that's great, but what we need now is action, not
Yeah.
seeing that inspired action,
Inspired.
that is infused with spirit, has a completely different impact.
Very different impact. It's genuinely becoming more proactive rather than reactive, because it's very easy for me and other people to see something horrible, have a reaction, and react out of our conditioned reaction. And what that reaction tends to create more polarization, which is the thing we're reacting to, is that people become so polarized and acting out their side of the polarization. And uh, this is really, I like, say that again, Michael, the reform.
Well, I don't know exactly what I said, but transformation literally is a change in form. So it goes from one form to another. And so spiritual transformation to me is infusing with spirit to the point where the form itself changes.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's a reformation
Mm.
of consciousness, the reforming of, here we have this incredible life energy that can take any form, and some of the form it takes have been very personal and egocentric and judgmental and create more suffering. And that energy that created that can be reformed to create something that's a true reformation. true reformation. I mean, the Dalai Lama is calling for a revolution, a turning around again to something deeper, new, fresh, alive, inspired. He's calling for a revolution in compassion.
Mm.
I don't know if you read that little book. It's a recent book he wrote. It's so beautiful, Michael. He's saying basically our generation screwed things up for the younger generation. I'm writing this book not to the older generation, but to the younger generation. And here's what we've learned, that how compassion is the answer and how we can be part of that rough reformation.
What's the book? Do you remember the name?
The Revolution of Compassion.
Oh,
A little, just okay. A little.
I'll grab it.
It's beautiful. I recommend it to people in my groups.
So one of the things, and this may or may not be sideways, but might help, can't hurt. One of the things that I have been just kind of thinking about a lot is this idea that, does it really have to be wake up calls? That's probably the phrase that I'm looking for. That when we wake up to something that is different than learning or creating, because we're waking up to something that has always been present. Now, there are, it seems to me, two different kinds of wake-up calls. There are wake-up calls that wake us up to a pre-existing problem we were formerly asleep to. So
yeah,
the world did not become more racially divided when George Floyd died. It looks like it did because we were awake, we were asleep to how some of us were asleep to on that, how racially divided we are. Similarly, there are wake-up calls to this deeper wisdom, this deeper compassion, this deeper presence, this deeper creative possibility in us that has always been, but by and large we're asleep to. And for me, there's something I have always been fascinated about. The Buddhist teacher Peter Fenner talks about radiant mind as being the point where the divine mind meets the personal mind, as being a very different thing than, oh, I just want to float away on spirit, or, oh no, I want to be real. That there is this perfect collision point.
Sid called it a middle ground. You've got the psychological world, you've got the spiritual world, and our soul. When our minds get quiet, we touch the middle ground, where we're fully human and fully divine simultaneously.
So that is, for me, the most fascinating place to look and to explore and to play in and to come from. It's caffeine for the soul, which is my longtime blog podcast thing. That is where humanity and divinity collide. That's actually, I think, what we actually is the subtitle of it. There's a moment when I was in my 20s. I went to Hawaii during one of the volcanic eruptions on the Big Island, and we hiked out, a group of Australians and I, to the lava flow at 4 a.m. because they said, oh, there's a great place to watch the sunrise. And it was literally the most epic moment of nature I have seen in my life, where there was a waterfall of volcano, of lava, hitting the ocean with the waves crashing against the cliff, and pillars of steam rising as the sun rose behind it. And it was, it was biblical. But that, to me, is this middle ground that's described. It is this radiant mind that the Buddhists talk about. There is so much power in that collision, in that intersection. And the idea that we have to choose one is basically saying it's like those epoxy tubes with the two different colored things. It's like by themselves, they're inert, but you mix them and they're really strong. And that seems to me to be an invitation that's on the table right now to mix the epoxy, to let the fire hit the ocean and not to get stuck in either one. And it's inspiring, dare I say.
Yeah, that's the steam that rises up when the two meet, and then the light reflects off that and through that and in that. That's beautiful metaphor. I mean, I know you and I have been critical often of disembodied spirituality, the separation, the escape, the becoming passively quiet. That an embodied spirituality is alive and juicy, and we get to experience everything, but we get to, in my mind, drop into that middle ground, that space where the real action happens, where we become fully engaged and responsive. Wisdom is a responsive intelligence. It's not, so many people are afraid if I'm upset and I get quiet, I'll become passive. I find the opposite happens. I get inspired. I get passionate. All right? It's a heartfelt passion rather than an ego, reactive, angry, bitter, hopeless passion. It's a very different steam coming off this baby.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite metaphors, I think it might have been Ken Manning, who we both know, who shared it with me, but was that getting to that deeper space, that quiet space, that state of meditation is like aligning the tires on a bicycle. You can move forward when the tires are out of whack, but the faster you go, the more likely something terrible is going to happen. But just taking that pause for the tires to realign means you can go as fast as you need to go, and it'll be you can go far because the tires are aligned. And it's such a simple shift. It's not you don't need a new bike.
Yeah.
It's just taking a moment to you don't even have to realign the tires manually. It's just suddenly when you stop, they click back into place, and now you move forward, but it's a completely different ride. Yeah. You can go faster, you can go further, you can go safer, as opposed to my bike's in the shop, but I'll do something about this next month. And look, we're in a context right now where it feels almost heretical to talk about anything other than social justice. But the truth is, that's true with everything. We've got an economy that's going to need to be reformed.
Yeah.
That alignment is going to be incredibly relevant to that. Even in simple things, if nothing else, get on better with your kids.
Yeah.
By not riding at them with a wonky bicycle. I'm sure the bicycle metaphor is probably, I don't know, but it makes sense to me.
I used to spend so many hours trying to figure out how to get more aligned with social justice, with my kids, with the environment, with life. And the more I thought about it, the more out of alignment I got. I got top heavy, and I was wobbling. I couldn't go straight down the road, and would often get confused. That was my style. I was, okay, what do I do, this or this? I don't know. Let me figure it out.
My wisdom is in my thinking.
to find out that wisdom does that alignment for free.
Hmm.
I like this notion of we drop out of our old thinking because you can't reform in the old. And when we drop out of our old thinking, we drop out of our conditioning, our reactivity, our knee jerk thinking, right? Our learned thinking. And we come to this drop in center, which welcomes everyone,
Hmm.
regardless of age, sex, religion, philosophy. We go
There's,
to
there's
drop
coffee and cookies there. Please tell me there's coffee and cookies there.
in. There are, there, there are the coffees and cookies are, we get inspired, which is lifted in spirit, and we get new and fresh, and it's the new and fresh that creates the reforming. So if we want to be reformists, we have to learn about the drop-in center, visit often, get nourished and uplifted so that we can effectively, like you said, have an impact on the world that brings more love and compassion rather than more reactivity and divisiveness,
Mhm.
more injustice, more judgment, more prejudice. Right? It's the cure. It's the cure for that.
The there's a connection. We're putting together a program for the fall that I haven't figured the whole thing out yet, but it's trying to address this gap where it's sort of like you and I have done a program with Natasha Swerdloff a few times called Silent Mind, Beautiful Feeling. And this would be Silent Mind, Beautiful Feeling, Inspired Action.
Yeah, I like
I
that.
think
I like that.
I think there is a problematic divide that people have conceptually between Silent Mind, Beautiful Feeling and Inspired Action, when in fact they are intimately connected. And for some people it's the beautiful feeling part that's missing, and for some people it's the inspired action part that's missing, and yet there's something so perfect that happens when you let them come together in the way that it seems to me they are made to come together. Like
Yeah.
we have to divide them
Yeah.
and then go, oh, I'm going to work on this one and I'm going to work on this one. And it's like we're stuck in either side of an epoxy tube and nothing changes. And we're like, what's wrong? I'm doing everything it says in the book. But, we need a new book.
I like that metaphor of the epoxy too, Michael.
Yeah, that's fresh for you for today.
When the two mix, then you find what holds things together.
Yeah.
And as opposed to being polarized in duality. And we find not a common ground between us, but something that transcends and is better for both of us.
So I know your kids are older now, but you've got grandkids, who are like you're on either side of this sort of coming of age. But as a way of kind of bringing our conversation for today to a close, if you were going to have a talk, I've been reading a lot about the talk that African Americans are, have with their teenage kids about, okay, here's what it's really like. If you were going to have a talk with anyone coming of age, what's the most important thing that you think people need to know as they kind of begin to head out into the world in a way where they have to start thinking for themselves?
Yeah.
Where they can't just keep going along with what they grew up with, even if what they grew up with seems lovely.
Well, I don't know what I would say then, but right now what comes to mind is I'd say something like, Every person in the world has a good heart. It's not the physical heart, it's the good heart. And every person in the world gets caught up in their head, gets caught up in their thinking. When we do, we all get out of balance. And we either become fearful or upset, fight or flight. Right? We become more insecure. But underneath all of that thinking, when that quiets down, you'll see everybody's good heart come out. Don't lose sight of the fact that people have a good heart, because that's what you want to talk. That's what you want to talk to. You want to talk to their head. You want to talk to their good heart. You want to see that if you show up with a good heart, it has an impact on people. And it's like the tuning forks. It's another way that alignment happens, that wisdom brings alignment, is when we drop into this good heart. You can tell by the feeling. You can tell by the feeling. That's the compassion revolution. We've been trying to bring about change in the world through our head. And you'll never, Sid Banks says, you'll never, ever, ever, ever find solutions to the world's problems in our personal mind, in our computer, in our thinking mind. The computer was not created for inspiration, new and fresh, that's beyond what's already been stored in memory. So know that you have a good heart. I'm talking to my grandkids, know that you have a good heart. I see your good heart. And I've learned to see the good heart in people, even when they're acting crazy. Behind and underneath all that upset thinking people are caught up in, you'll see their beauty shine through. Something like that.
We're like 6 months overdue for a hug, man.
You better believe it.
Oh,
God.
Thank you for joining me. If you guys have enjoyed this, do check out Dickens' site at threeprinciplesmentoring.com and come join us if you're seeing this in close to real time next Tuesday, I think. Is it Tuesday or Wednesday? Wednesday.
Wednesday.
The 10th of June for Living in a State of Meditation. You can learn more about that at michaelneal.org. Dicken, a pleasure as always, sir.
It's delightful, and I look forward to being with you Wednesday. That'll be fun.
Cool.
Natural meditation.
Thanks, everyone. Have fun, learn heaps. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.